Hey guys, in this video we'll be continuing with the Python tutorials. We'll be going over copying lists in Python. So to make a copy of the list, you must copy the list's elements. Basically, you just point another variable to the list. So in Python, we just need to when you point one variable to another, it makes both variables reference the same object in memory. So recall that in Python, assigning one variable to another variable simply makes both variables reference the same object in memory. So if we have an example here, so if I just have a main class or a main function, then we'll have just some list points to some numbers. So all you have to do really is you just take another list variable that's pretty much, it just doesn't point, you're just declaring it at this point, and then now instead of just declaring it, we're initializing it to we're going to initialize it to list1. So now list actually points to list1, and basically list1 just now points to this this list object here. So what happens is list1 is a name for a hex code memory location. Hex code is like hexadecimal, so it looks like some hexadecimal string of letters and numbers, which is actually numerical, and then that's actually representing, so list1 actually represents that string of hex digits, and basically that string of hex digits actually just represents this list here. But now list1 actually represents that hex string. So really it's list1 points to some hex string, and that hex string points to some object in memory, which is this. So now we're just taking list2 to point it to list1. So what's really happening is we have list2 pointing to list1, where list1's pointing to that hex string, hexadecimal memory location number, and that hexadecimal memory location number points to this list. So hopefully that makes sense. That's pretty much it. So now after this code executes, both variables list1 and list2 will reference the same list in memory. So let's just see if we have some other examples here so we can. So we have list1 points to some numbers. List2 points to list1. And we can actually print list1. Actually, sorry, we just need to print list1 like this. So if you run it, whoops, just need to call the main function. So if we run it, we'll have the list1 get printed. So now if we print list1, and then we print list2, we should get the exact same thing twice. As you can see, basically nothing changed. So we have both lists now pointing to the same memory location. So just moving on here, what we can do now is we can have list 0 point to 99. sorry, list 1 of list index, sorry, list 1 of list index 0, or not 99, but just point to some number. You can say list 1 points to, list 1 of list index 0 points to, actually we could just do some random number, some big number. So now that number is stored in that memory, is now stored in index 0 in list 1. Okay, I see what's happening here. Okay, so what the point of this example is, you'll see in a sec, is we're changing list 1 of list index 0. So list 1 is here, but that's happening after this has already happened. So it's different than pointers in C, which is pretty complicated, to be honest. I'll show you guys what's going to happen. But basically now we have, so if we print it out, if we now print list 1, we'll now have a new list at the bottom with that large number, whatever that is. And then 2, 3, 4. Now if we print list 2, we also had basically list 2 pointing to list 1. So what happens is we printed list 1. So we changed list 1 of list index 0, which points to this large number. Then we had list 2 points to list 1. So we printed list 1, printed list 2, then we changed list 1 of list index 0. Actually, it's actually pretty much the same thing as pointers here, because what's happening is that basically if we have now, since originally list, so this part's kind of complicated, to be honest. I think it's different in different languages. But what's happening here is that so once list 2 points to list 1 originally, and we change list 1 index 0. So we change the list 1 list index 0, since before list 2 was pointing to list 1. That means when we print list 2, it's also going to be updated, because remember list 2 has a tag to point to that memory location, which is list 1. So it's still pointing to that tag. Right, so what's happening is that in this case, when we print list 2, it's actually going to update the elements as list 1 does. So if I can just try to explain this a little bit more. So first we created a list of integers and assigned the list to the list 1 variable. So then in the next line we assign list 1 to point to list 2. After this, both list 1 and list 2 reference the same list in memory. So that was this line here. In the next line we printed the list referenced by list 1. The output of the print function is shown on the next line, which is this pretty much down here. So then after that we printed the list referenced by list 2. The output of the print function is shown, which is basically here. That's the line, and then that's what happened after executing it. So notice that it is the same output as the previous list above, and then we change. So then after that we change the value of list of. So we change the value of list. We change the value of list 1 of index 0 list 1 of list index 0, we change that to some large number. Then after we printed the list referenced by list 1, so that was the list there, that got printed. So in the next line, so we printed the list referenced by list 2. So the output of the print function there is shown. Notice that the first element also changed to some large number. So in this example, list 1 and list 2 variables reference the same list in memory. So this is almost exactly like pointers without pointers. So I think it's actually different than Java. So suppose you want, so this is very similar to C programming. So if you suppose you want to make a copy of the list, so list 1 and list 2 reference two separate but identical lists. One way to do this is with a loop. So we can do a loop example. So hopefully that makes sense. So basically what happens is, instead of a copy, it's more pointing to the memory location. So it's not really making a copy. Don't think that it's making a copy. Sometimes some text will say that it's copying the other list. That's not really true. It's more so, in this case, list 2 is pointing to list 1. So once list 1 updates later on, list 2 is going to update. That's a little tricky. That's more C, less Java. So just try to memorize that. It might be a little bit hard to understand. Once you practice, so you'll get it. So we'll just have another example here. So again, if we just we can keep the first part. So if we can create an empty list. List 2 points to some empty. It's basically just declaring it to an empty, or initializing an empty list. Now we can copy the items. So we can say for I in list 1, list 2 dot append I. So if we then so after this code executes, list 1 and list 2 will reference two separate but identical lists. So going back to the other example, so let's just print them out. So if we save and run it, we have list 1 and list 2. What did we do before we changed list 1? Yeah, so we changed list 1 after. See here, list 2 isn't pointing to list 1. So if we change list 1 here, the same thing. So list 1 of list index 0, we point it again to some large number, and then this time we print list 1, then print list 2. They should be separate, I think. Yeah, so we have two separate lists here in this case. So as you can see, it's different from the last example where we had both of them the same after the change. Because list 2 isn't pointing to list 1. Is there some other ways we can... I think I might have another example here. So another way, basically a simpler way, in programming sometimes they say elegant way to accomplish the same task is to use the concatenation operator as shown here. So I'll show you guys. So what we can do, so I think what we can do is we can keep this the same. So we can take this out. Let's just move this down here for a sec. Take this stuff out. So basically what we do is we say list2 points to some empty list plus list1. Whoops. So list2 points to some empty list plus list1. And then we should have the exact same thing. So let's just comment this out for a sec. Print that out. Oh, whoops, I didn't print anything, so let's print out, we'll print list1. Then we'll print list2. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So as you can see, actually sorry, we didn't change this first, so now let's change the values and see how this differs now after we do this. Okay, so we print list1, print list2, so list1 of list index 0 points to this large number. So again, we're changing list1 of list index 0 to point to some large number. Then we're printing out the list and then printing out the second list as well. So as you can see, the second list did not point exactly to this list. There's a trick in Python that basically we said we want to point list2 to some empty list, and then basically just concatenate it to the other list. So in that way, it's not really pointing directly to list2. Therefore, it's avoiding that kind of pointer thing, what's happening that we showed before, where it prints out the same list. So we'll continue to work with these concepts going forward. You'll see that often when we point things to different things sometimes compared to other languages. If you're used to coding other languages, you may have some discrepancies that you'll notice while you test and run your code, so you may just have to make some changes on the fly and all that. So we'll do some more examples going forward. In the next example, we'll go over processing lists. So thanks for watching. If you guys liked the video, you can like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.